America, planet Earth, what's good? This is your boy Codell, and welcome back to another episode of the Father's Gospel Podcast. Today, I'm excited. We got Mark Ludwig on the show. Mark, how you doing?
Doing great. Yeah,
Excellent.
thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on. And we've been trying to line this interview up for a while, and we're supposed to have you on a few months back, but we kind of messed it up on our side because our other interview went longer than it should have. So thank you for rescheduling with us. And yeah, so Mark, you're a big parental rights activist, specifically in the family court. Is that how you would classify yourself, or do you have another kind of term you'd maybe use?
Just a dad who wanted time with my son.
Right, right.
Then when I realized how prevalent the systemic problem was, I just started fighting for kids across the country. So it's not fighting for the dads or the moms. I'm fighting for the kids to be able to have a right to both of their parents.
Right. Now, as far as your background goes, mention your son. Tell us a little bit about what brought you to where you are now with the family courts and legislation and all that stuff.
I'd been active in politics, very, very active. Matter of fact, the year my son was born, I was expected to make a pretty big run for Congress and
Okay.
had a pretty big future. I'd been gearing for that plan for 25 years up to that point. And then shortly after he was born, there was a question of paternity. And in order to avoid a paternity test, his mom basically kidnapped him for 204 days. And I spent 204 days trying to track him down and fight for a right to be his dad. And I was
Okay.
pretty well known in St. Louis. So the case became pretty well known. The story went viral. And once it did, I started getting message after message after message from people saying, hey, the same thing happened to me. The same thing happened to me. And I
Right.
realized there's a systemic problem in the country where, and I'll fight just as hard as for a mother as I will for a father. It just is a fact that statistically speaking, in 83% of the cases, courts favor the mother. And the
Right.
mother can basically get along with any, they can kidnap a child, they can, make false allegations, do whatever the heck they want, and basically get
Well,
away from it. And the sad thing is, it's the kids who pay the price. It's not about, sadly, we get so many people, they talk about my right as a dad. I'm not worried about my right as a dad. I'm worried about my son's right to his dad
yeah.
because he's the one who missed out on so much time during those first few years when the bonding is critical. And all
Right.
across this country, there are kids that are missing out with a chance to have their dad pick them up from school, to have their dad teach them how to ride a bike, to have their dad be able to take them on a vacation. They're missing out on those memories. And once that sand is gone through the hourglass, it's too late.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that all the time. There's so many memories just dealing with my own case that I've unfortunately missed out on. And I mean, it sucks to say it this way, but the best thing I can do is just kind of suck it up and keep pushing forward, and just deal with it as it goes along. So as far as like with your son, when if you don't mind me asking, how were you able to find like him when his mother disappeared with him? Like, how were you able to
Well, she was
find?
in the St. Louis area, but the attorneys I checked with said that knowing that her background, they said, Mark, you can't be looking for him because she's going to claim you're stalking and now she's going to file more problems for you.
Okay.
So I had to waste the extra money of having an attorney and a private detective figure out for sure where she was. And then she was avoiding the, being served several times because I wanted a DNA test. I thought he was mine. I just had a feeling. And I was doing pretty well at the time. I had a pretty successful business and I lost all interest in that. I lost all interest in politics. I just wanted to be a dad.
Right.
And my life was basically crumbling. And my mom said, she's like, Mark, what are you going to do if he's not yours? And I was like, Mom, you know what? I'd rather go for it and him not be mine than not go for it. And 18 years later, find out I missed out on. But the other thing is, I told her, though, I don't know how to explain it, but not to be over spiritualistic, but I could tell he was mine. I mean, you don't get as strong of a feeling as I had every night when you go to bed, every morning when you wake up. And I would have dreams about him in the middle of the night. And I knew for a fact. And so I was going for it. And so I literally, like I did, I lost my business over it and lost my political career, but I don't regret it a single bit. I'd do it over and 100 times over. for what I've been
Right.
able to get within the last 14 and a half years.
Well, I love that because I mean that just speaks volumes about just who you are as a man and a dad. I mean, and man, the whole dreams thing, I can relate to that. I've had more dreams than I can count about my son, and I mean, it's not that they're bad, but they get pretty intense, and when I wake up, I'm just like, I miss you so much. Like, but yeah, okay. So well, man, that's pretty crazy. I'm glad you were able to find your son, and obviously, this has been years ago now because your son's a teenager,
Yeah,
but
he was only 6 weeks old when she did that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I missed basically the first year. I missed the first Father's Day, and I had begged and begged and begged. I had sent her because she was still at least reading the emails, and I
right,
was begging. I'm like, please let me at least get my first Father's Day with him. And then,
right.
missed the first Christmas, the first Thanksgiving, the first Halloween, and it
Yeah,
was hell. I mean, if I wasn't a Christian, I would have committed suicide, hands
yeah,
down. Because I wanted to be honest. I actually thought about it many many times because
yeah,
I mean, he was my life, and I didn't know if. And she would send me pretty nasty messages telling me that I'd never see him again, and she'd already kept. She had two other fathers that she'd done this to with five other.
okay,
And
yeah,
unfortunately, I was pretty naive. I didn't realize what had happened to the other two fathers until just after she got pregnant. I started finding out about some things. And so we went to a marriage counselor. And because I was still determined that, even though I had found out by that point that she had been living a double life,
yeah,
uh, I was just raised that if you're having a baby, you need to be married. And my parents even said, they were like, Mark, it's obviously she's not the person you thought she was, but you got to marry her. She's having your child. And
yeah,
so we went to a marriage counselor. And I still remember one time she didn't show up for the counseling session, which was pretty common. And I did. And I will never forget the time the counselor asked me, she said, Mark, let me ask you a question. How does she treat and talk about fathers number one and two?
yeah,
And as I started to answer, she said, you don't need to tell me. She said, I want you to tell yourself. And she said, you need to ask yourself, are you prepared? Because that's what you're about to go through. And I
right,
was like, holy crap. I mean, that
yeah,
was a Christian counselor because we'd been going, it was a Christian counselor we went to. And I still would just never forget that. It just like hit me like a ton of bricks. And I
right.
realized then what I was about to go through. And sadly, mine was even worse because the other two fathers pretty much gave up. They fought,
Mm,
fought, fought, and then finally they just threw their hands up. And sadly, that's what happens to a lot of dads is you can only go so far. I mean, it's like imagine running a marathon, 26 miles. You have no breath left, no energy, and somebody says, "Get up! You got to run another marathon in 5 minutes." And you do
right.
that every single day, week after week, month after month, year after year. The constant harassing emails, the constant harassing text messages, changing of the schedules. You go to pick them up, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm not going to let you have them today, even though it's a part of the court order. Good luck fighting the court order because you look like the bitter parent if you're fighting all the minor things. And it's not the
Right.
minor things, it's that 200 minor things add up to a major. And so
Yeah.
you have to try and choose your battle. And after a while, like I said, most dads give up.
Yeah.
And trust me, I was pushed close to that point many,
Right.
many, many times. It was just, I lost everything I owned. I got to the point where I was literally eating food out of trash cans for a while. I was living in my parents' basement for a while. And it was pretty bad. I lost everything. And the ironic thing is, I'm still paying child support to somebody who had done some questionable things with her finances.
Yeah.
And is living a great lifestyle. At one point, she was living on a 7-acre estate in the most prime neighborhood in St. Louis, and I'm the one paying child support while I'm eating
It
food out of trash cans.
yeah, it's child support. I mean, all about Title 40 and all that stuff. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's crazy. And I think that's one of the biggest challenge too for dads as far as and not the child support stuff. I mean, that's obviously can be a challenge, but just kind of try when you're going through it in the family courts, trying to find that balance of making sure not only are you putting the effort in to obviously get back to your child, but you're also taking time to make sure you yourself are stable and okay. And that could be one of the biggest challenges. I mean, dude, that's yeah. I mean, I know for me,
Sad part is people are driven into spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on an attorney for a custody battle. Then they're
right,
paying child support to support the other home. But what people don't understand is you still have the bedroom in your home. You can't
right,
call the mortgage company or the landlord and say, you know what, my kid's only here 4 days a month, so I'm just only going to pay a portion of the rent this month. No, you're
right.
still on the hook. And the sad thing is when I look at the drastic difference of what her lifestyle was worth and compared to what I had over here. And I think, how does that benefit a child? When I was so exhausted because any minute I didn't have him, I was working my butt off trying to get the money to pay child support and attorneys. And when he would
Right.
come over, I was so exhausted that I would basically be in bed the whole day. How
Yeah.
the heck does that benefit a child to do that? It's
Right.
basically child abuse. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's
Well,
the
I mean,
child who pays the price. Now, fortunately for me, my love language quality time. I love just spending quality time with him. And
yeah.
and especially when he was young, that was his too. Is he wanted that quality time. So but still there's just so many memories that we could have had that we missed out on because I didn't have enough money to do anything like that. I didn't have and I was too tired when I did have the time or the money.
Right. Right. So big picture wise, Mark, for you, because excuse me, you have your foundation. You have it's a foundation, correct? Or what? It's STL
Basically,
Mark
been doing everything
Ludwig.
on my own. We had originally started Americans for Equal Shared Parenting, but to be honest, we ran out of money, so I started doing everything on my own for the last couple of years.
Right.
It's been on my own. I've been driving for Uber every second I can to try and barely scrape a living out. Been very
Right.
fortunate and very blessed, not to be over spiritualistic, but God has provided. I mean, every trip that I've needed to go on,
Amen.
the
Yeah.
last second, I'm not kidding. Out of nowhere, somebody I don't even know comes up with the last scrimping bit to be able to get me on a trip.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
the shared parenting community has been great, supporting and helping me along so that I can go on the trips because, not to brag, but that's what I did for a living. I was in the political arena heavily, and that's what the shared parenting community needed was somebody on the inside. In the
So with
past,
this,
oh, go ahead.
let me ask you this: with the shared parenting community, for you personally, what is your? Do you have like a final goal? What is your goal in doing all this?
Well, my personal ultimate goal is to train about 1,000 leaders across the country that can
Okay.
do what I do. Unfortunately, in the short term, and I hope this doesn't sound arrogant, but I think you'll even acknowledge most people consider me the guy in the country. I'm the only one that has the connections at the federal level, at the state level, that's personally worked on every single piece of shared parenting legislation that's passed. As you
Right.
are involved in 31 states. The challenge with that is it's highly dependent on me as a person. And
Yeah.
that's a bad thing because if something happens to me, everything crumbles. What I
Right.
want is where it's system based and not person based. So that
Okay.
it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. And if I
Right.
can get 1,000 people trained, they're going to be popping up everywhere to where we're not dependent on me. And then we need two aspects. We need federal legislation to get rid of Title 4D. That program
Right.
is breaking up families left and right. And then at the state level, we've got a lot of issues to tackle. 50-50 equal shared parenting bills, guardian ad litem reform, judicial accountability, custodial interference, paternity fraud, which is rampant in this country. We've got a lot of things to do. So this is not in 5 years this will be over. This will be going on for 40 years. It's a
So
matter of
you're
life.
trying to go after pretty, I mean, it sounds like you're trying to go after the whole entire thing and basically restructure it or do whatever needs to be done. But yeah,
Yeah, it's taken us 40 or 50 years to get in this hole. It's going to take a while to turn the tide. But the
right.
key is we have to make sure that we turn the tide in the right way. Sometimes in crises, you can fight too hard for too much of a change that swings the pendulum too far the other way, and you don't think the ramifications. And
I
as I
agree.
said, I'm not fighting for the mothers or the dad, I'm fighting for the kids. So we always have to take a step back and say, wait a minute here. Even though, yes, I'm a little frustrated, I want to make sure that pendulum stops in the middle, not go too far the other side.
Yeah, because I don't want how the courts right now overwhelmingly tend to rule against dads. I don't want the pendulum to ever swing the other way so far where to all of a sudden it's the opposite, where it's just overwhelmingly ruling against the moms. I mean, overall, it doesn't help anybody, it just hurts society as a whole.
Yeah,
So
kids need both parents. God designed opposites to attract for a reason. Each has
Right,
a
right.
strength and each has a weakness. And if you take one out, that's a very unbalanced, unhealthy way to raise a child, because you don't normally, in a normal relationship, one of the parents is going to be more the nurturer and one's going to be the more disciplinarian. And
Yeah,
there's a very good dynamic that develops then. And the child sees that too when they grow up. They see having to work together.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we have either a toxic parent who doesn't want to co-parent, or no relationships at all with one of the parents. You don't get that dynamic. And that's why the kids growing up without dads, I mean, it's overwhelming, the statistics of, behavioral problems, discipline problems, incarceration problems, violent crime, high school dropouts, teen pregnancies. 80% or more of all of those came because the kid grew up without a dad.
Right, right. And I mean, I always say this on my show because I myself, I grew up without my dad and I hit a lot of those stats. Like I barely dodged going to prison. I mean, I've been raided by the police long time ago, all sorts of crazy stuff. And I'm not making excuses, but I am that statistic. Like I was raised in a single parent, a single mother household, no dad. And it was like I love my mom, but it was chaos growing up, is what I'm trying to say. And yeah, I've had to learn a lot.
Yeah, and sadly, statistically, that becomes a cycle that repeats itself, because so many
Right,
times when people are traumatized as a child, that becomes the norm in their mind, even though it's not normal to the
right.
child growing up in that is what is normal. So sadly, they become attracted to the same dynamic as a parent and seek that out.
Right, right. I'm
And
guilty of it. Guilty
yeah,
of it.
there's so many people in the shared parenting community. If you ask them, they'll say that, hey, that I wound up exactly what happened to my dad is exactly what happened to me.
Right, right. Okay, so I know you only got a couple minutes left. As far as because you had a meeting, you've had one or two meetings now with the Trump administration.
Yeah, I've had several, and I'll be meeting again in February.
Okay.
Um, and I like it. Once again, I don't care if people are Republican or Democrat. If we're wanting this change, you need somebody inside the White House. I mean,
Right,
people are always like, well, this should be nonpartisan. No, no, no.
right,
Nonpartisan means you ignore both parties. You're good luck getting something passed if you ignore the two big parties. It needs
right,
bipartisan, and
right.
bipartisan says take someone who has contacts on each party. I just happen to be the guy that has the connections on our side, and very
Yeah.
fortunate to have personal relationships, very good personal relationships with about 20 people that are already part of the new administration coming in. The
Okay, now
challenge is, oh, go ahead.
I know you were saying earlier, you're not going to be directly part of the cabinet, because you're not living in DC. But my question for you is, as far as you working with them and the 20 people that what is your focus with them particularly? Because obviously, there's different things you're trying to achieve. So with them, with these individuals that you're working with in the administration, what are you trying to address with them specifically as far as
A
the
couple
issues
things.
go?
First off, is just to be heard. You have to realize, whether people like Trump or not, they have to admit, if there was ever a president in history that's going to shake things up over the next 4 years. And the
Yeah.
problem we've had with Title 40 is it's the status quo. Nobody wants to change it. It's become such a big bureaucracy. People think it's too big to change now. If there was ever a guy, Trump is the only guy who could actually fight it and do something about it. The challenge is he's also the only guy that could change the Department of Education, the budget system, the borders crisis, foreign affairs. And so sadly, there's about 8,000 issues that everybody and their brother is like us trying to get the attention of the White House.
Right.
So the early fight is just to get our name in there so they know. Now, long term, what I want to do is to be honest, Title 40, that whole program needs to be done away with. It shouldn't
Right.
be there. The government should not be involved in that process at all. And it's a $6.5 billion problem. Now, I did mention, last time I talked to Vivek Ramaswamy back in DC a couple weeks ago, and that's part of what he's doing is trying to slash and cut. And I
Mm.
told him, that's a $6.5 billion budget that could be cut. All it's doing is destroying families.
So you got to talk to Vivek Ramaswamy directly. You talk to him about this with Title 4D.
Yeah, I did get it was a brief conversation. But yeah, we were
Beautiful.
at the Hilton Hotel, and we were at a meeting at Alec, and I got some time with him. And then I did
Nice.
get not his contact information, but the person he wants me to contact for follow-up information. So I'm in contact with the Doge partnership. So part of it is to get rid of that. And then if we can't get rid of it in the short term, to try and at least make some changes. It used to be a means tested program, which meant the only people that were a part of Title 4D is if the receiving parent of child support ended up on welfare.
Mm,
Aside from that, those middle class cases should not be a part of that program. In
yeah.
1996, that was when that was added on. So my short-term goal, which I think they're very receptive to, is the fact that the government should not be involved in a non-mean tested program. So in the short term, my goal is, hey, let's get this back to where Title 4D will never affect a child support order unless it is affected by welfare. If not, that's not their role. Get the heck out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. That's pretty great. I mean, that sounds like you're making some pretty good headways in there. So
The other
yeah.
thing I want to do is try and put a prerequisite that if the states are going to get funding from Title 4D, they have to have legislation on the books addressing parenting time before they establish a child support order. Because when you
Okay.
have the federal government putting all the emphasis on money, what we're telling states is we care more about money than we do about the kids. We need to
Yes.
put a
Yes.
prerequisite that says no money gets doled out if you don't address parenting time, because parenting time with the child is a lot more important than the money for the child. You can always get the money back later, but you can't
Right.
get that time back once that kid missed out on those memories.
Well, I love that you're saying this, Mark, because it sounds like I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you think that by like getting rid of Title 4D or switching some things in it, it'll kind of have a trickle down effect that
Exactly. Oh yeah,
upon.
that's the spigot. I still remember years ago, Phyllis Schlafly used to always say that if you have a problem passing a piece of legislation, look deeper because there's a money spigot somewhere that needs to
Mm,
be turned off. And she
yeah.
was right. And ironically, one of the things she talked about back in 1998, she wrote a paper about Title 4D was going to create a fatherless society. And I had no idea at the time how important, because I knew her back then very well. I had no
Yeah.
idea at the time how important that paper was going to become in my life years after she died.
Well, she was one of your mentors, correct?
Exactly. Yeah. She lived in St. It's sad, but you don't really appreciate it when you get to see somebody on a regular basis. But she is considered, arguably so, one of the top, if not the number one most influential females in political history was Phyllis Schlafly. But I
Well,
saw it at the time. So to me, it was just, I mean, I had respect for her. She was a smart lady, but I never realized how big she was at the time.
yeah, it's interesting because I didn't know about her, and then I found out about her through you. And I haven't done deep diving yet, but I did a decent amount of research onto her, watched some of her speeches and all that stuff, and I was like, this lady was warning everybody decades before, like she knew right from the start.
Yeah,
So
she
yeah,
was a
she's
smart
an
lady, very,
incredible
very
woman.
smart lady.
Yeah, yeah.
Even
Well,
into her 90s, she was smart. I mean, like I said, she was a smart. She would fall asleep a lot in her 90s, but she was still pretty smart when she was awake.
right. I mean, 90 years old, I think the vast majority of 90-year-olds are going to be ready to take a nap most of the day.
Yeah, she would have not making fun of Joe Biden, but she would have danced circles around Joe Biden
Oh, I bet. I
in her
bet.
90s. I mean, she was a sharp lady.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's crazy. Joe is almost gone, so I'm very excited for where everything's heading. But anyways, Mark, is there anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here? I know you got some things you got to get done.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would encourage people to do is to always stay. And it was funny because my pastor this morning in the sermon was talking about, what's done in the past is done. You can't change the past. And so many people are, he was talking about like in marriages where people go through a drought in their marriage and they're trying to rebuild and basically start over. And they keep thinking back to why can't we be like we were in the golden years when we were first married? And he said, you know what? It'd be great to do that, but you can't keep rehashing that. Today
Right.
is today, and you're trying to rebuild your marriage. So enjoy the fact that you're rebuilding, and don't say, "Boy, we had a great marriage, and then it went downhill." And he talks about the same thing with addiction and people struggling with addiction, and they keep being drawn by the past. And I know most people watching this, if they've been through a custody battle, it was horrible. I know mine was. But
Yeah.
I can't keep focusing on those 204 days. I can't keep focusing on all the junk that I went through for 12 years, week after week after week. Instead, I have to say, it is what it is. I need to focus on the future. What I see a lot of in the shared parenting community is people get stuck in this revenge mode, where
Right.
this victim mentality, and instead of trying to find positive solutions for the future, they're wanting revenge for the past.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Not like I should be preaching or anything like that,
No,
but
I
very
agree. I
truthfully,
agree. I mean, just got to give it to God. I mean, and I think that's for any, even if you're a believer, that's always, you got to remind yourself. But I know for me, it's been life changing. Just when I'm in that mode to where I'm remembering not just to pray, but also be like, all right, God, like this is what I'm trying to get done. Also, let me know what I can do for you, and I'm just giving it all over to you, and I trust that we're gonna get there as long as I put in the effort and doing the
yeah,
best
we
I
just need
can.
people to
So
realize what's in the past is the past. Stop reliving it. Stop. People are always like, Mark, why don't you tell your story more often? I don't need to tell my story. I'm focused on the changes that need to take place. Every time you're telling your story, the emotions are building up, the anger is building up. It's not a healthy place to be. You can't
right,
change what happened. Stop living in the past. Stop telling your story. Start focusing on the solutions. What am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do to make a change? That's one of the biggest keys. And then along those same lines, don't protest. The reason we have so many problems is people, when they're new to the community, they want to hold posters up in front of the Capitol and think they're making a change. And that might work in the movies. But I'll tell you, after dealing with legislator after legislator after legislator for 40 years, that works against us. That makes
I
us look like a
agree.
bunch of angry dads.
I've never been a march around on the streets with a sign protest. To me, I just think it's whether people doing it realize it or not, it's more for show. Like it really doesn't
That's it.
achieve
They're
anything.
trying to make themselves feel good. But to meal
Yeah.
with Liz, and that's why I have that class, and not to promote it, but I really do want to, because if people, and you graduated from the class, but
Tell them about your class, Mark. Yeah, let the people know about
but
your
yeah,
class
the
real
reason
quick.
I do that is I've been to 29 states so far, and every time I go to a state, I bring somebody with me, and I
Yeah,
see people who mean well. But the
right.
analogy I give is, if you want to be an electrician, you don't just rip a panel off a wall and start hooking up wires to see what happens. If you
Yeah,
want to be a doctor, you don't just cut somebody open and see if you can put the parts back together. You're going to
right,
go to an electrician school, you're going to be an apprentice, you're going to go to medical school, you're going to do an internship. You don't just show up at the Capitol to change a law. You need to know what to do. You need to know the basics of how does a bill become a law? What are the players? What's a majority
right.
whip? What's a caucus leader? What's the chair of the committee? How do you frame a narrative? So I came up with a whole class to take people step by step to where, if even if they didn't pay attention in 8th grade civics, I can still take that person and they can walk into a Capitol and have a pretty good idea of exactly what to do, how to do it, to where they don't need me. And as I said, that's my goal. I want 1,000 people like that they don't need me. Sure, I can coach them over the phone and mentor them, but if they take this class, they're going to know what to do. So stlmarkludwig.com is the website for
Yeah,
information.
that's stlmarkludwig.com. And it's a good class, you guys. I mean, me and several of my friends here in Washington, we took the class, and Mark does a great job of just making it easy to digest and understand. I definitely recommend it. I got his book too, which kind of just lays out how you need to what steps you need to take as far as approaching legislatures and all that stuff. So yeah, Mark, you definitely know what you're talking about. And I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you. It was fun having you in the class. We had a good group with that. You were in the first initial class that we ever had.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah,
Girl
we were
class.
your
That's a good
first
group.
class.
I love that group.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here, and I will make sure I have a link to your website in the channel. Everyone go to stlmarkludwig.com and check out his courses. And I do recommend you signing up. You guys will get a lot from what he teaches. Anyways, yeah, Mark, thank you. And anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
No, but thank you as well. Everybody's a team, and everybody has a strength and a niche, and you've got a neat niche. So
Yeah.
that's what we need to all understand. We're not in competition. I need to be glad that we have somebody like you. You can be glad there's somebody like me, and let's edify
Amen.
what each other does right. And so, like I said, very sincerely, very glad you're filling a neat niche that we've needed in the shared parenting community.
Well, yeah, no, and I mean, it's a slow build with this, but that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build myself and me and my brother Kyle into being that media outlet that really just helps get all these stories out there and this information regarding, fathers, the family courts, all that type of stuff. So I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate you.
All right, Mark, you have a great day. God bless.
All right.
Here comes Max.